Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. What's up, Callow? How was your weekend? Good?
Good. Started marathon training again this week.
Good,
Yeah,
a good week to do that when it's like 168 degrees outside.
it's the worst week in like 2 years. That's great. Really,
Yeah,
really thrilled about this development.
yeah. This is a weird weather place. I like that we have all the seasons. That's nice. I tell that to my LA friends. But what 2 weeks ago it was like, wow, summer. Where's summer at? And now it's like, oh, it's southern Texas here. All of a sudden, like that could happen around here.
I would say I've kind of said this, and you can agree or disagree with me. The last 2 years, we've had like a little bit of blips of hot weather, but it hasn't been
Yeah.
as bad as it was in the past. And then there's this week where it's like, oh, it's back.
I feel
Like,
like I remember training camp last year not being as bad. There were days,
yeah,
but I,
correct.
I remember it being like cooler and it rained a lot. It rained a
Right.
lot during training camp. So I don't know.
we haven't
Whatever.
had we haven't had like the relentless humidity and sun.
That's true.
That's what I and like I we you and me would joke about it because we'd be at the station. We turned into Florida. It rained every day at three
Yeah.
o'clock, right? Like so I didn't think it was too bad. This week looks terrible though. This week looks like it's a throwback.
I know earlier this year we asked everybody, like, do you want me to do football no matter what at the beginning of a show? And I know that everybody said yes. And I agree with you most of the time, but I'm sorry, guys. It's just not happening today. I'll get to some football stuff in a little bit because look, Oklahoma City won it all, and nothing else is happening right now. Absolutely nothing else. Unless we need to talk about position players pitching to the Nationals, there's really not much to talk about here today. So I do want to start with the NBA Finals last night, which unfortunately sucked because Tyrese Halliburton got injured in the early parts of Game 7. And I'll give Indiana credit because they were leading at half anyway. And then OKC did what they were supposed to do in the second half, which was take advantage of a team that was missing their star player and beat them because, oh, by the way, they've been the best team the entire season anyway. And I guess I wonder if they heard Stephen A's halftime screaming at them about how they need to show up and do this and do that and the whole thing. I'll get to that in a minute. But Oklahoma City, good for you. Congratulations. This is the dream of Ted and everybody around here that they're going to compile all these picks and get enough players and eventually land on a couple of them, that end up being greats. Shea was not actually drafted by them. They traded for him. Jay Will was not like a high pick, actually. I mean, he was a first-round pick, but he wasn't a high pick. So there's lots of ways to find your stars and build your team. But I know around here, this is the dream that they look at them and they go, we're trying to do it their way. We're going to compile a bazillion assets. Hopefully we'll land on one or two guys who end up being great, like maybe Sar becomes great, and then everything else will kind of come together and we'll have a bunch of 25-year-olds that win a championship. And I doubt it will happen, but good for OKC because they won it all doing it this way. And very few have won it all doing it this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more sad part though is they have gone through two different generations while the Wizards have remained incompetent in every single way. And so yeah, it's the dream and I know they're doing it the right way now, but it also takes time. It also takes luck and the first little bit of luck they needed was terrible this offseason. So to me
Yeah.
it's a long ways away. What
It
I
would
will
have been
say
nice to get Cooper Flag for sure. Like I don't care when he's going to be good. Great. I don't know. Will he be good? Yes, he will be good. They didn't get that.
well,
So
let's just
yeah,
start with let's not have the worst thing happen and go to the sixth spot, and it
right,
did happen. We can
right.
just start there, and that's what happened to them. As far as it goes with OKC, though, they acquired 1 million picks. They had those 20-win seasons. They did do it, the quote unquote tanking way. So you can tell me that tanking doesn't work, but they're the shining example of it does when you asset manage, and then. Honestly, with SGA, I mean, look at it scoring champion, MVP this year, and he gets a ring on top of it. That's an all time season right there.
Yes, it is historic year for him. Incredible season for him. Young, so he's not going anywhere.
Yep.
They're going to continue to get better. I did find Sam Presti was the person who spoke for the organization on the podium last night after they were handed the trophy. And Lisa Salters, who I think does a fantastic job on the NBA coverage, did ask what I thought was kind of an awkward question, which was, did you think it would come this fast, even though their quote, and she even said this, 6 years into their rebuild? And I went, Mike Rizzo's probably smiling, listening to that one going, oh, 6 years. We got 6 years, huh? Oh, cool. Because like that one I haven't heard before. You got here fast 6 years after you started this process. If you're not there, or at least on the cusp by 6 years, the rebuild's wrong, isn't it? Like, what kind of question is that?
Yeah, I thought that was weird. And then I also was kind of thinking too, the NBAs could range though. Like it could be 2 years if you land your SGA, or 6 if you don't have, or 10 if you're the Wizards when you don't have one at all, right? Like there are layers to it. I thought that was a little bit weird too. Like I don't think any sport says it's going to take 6 years to rebuild anything. Like that's what I actually thought was the weirdest part about
Even
it.
Ron is sitting there going, where's my 6 years?
Yeah.
I was getting 6 years.
Right, exactly. So I was like, no one says, oh, it's going to take us 6 years. Not a single franchise across any of the major four says it's going to take 6 years.
That was a weird one, though, because they are really young. They're a very young team to have won a championship and to have the best record in the league. At the same time, they did start this a long time ago, and they got here. I guess Philadelphia has attempted to do this, and it's failed. They attempted to do the same thing. They went full trust the process by going really, really, really bad, getting lucky in the lottery, unlike the Wizards, over and over, and ending up really with Embiid. But like the same thing, it's odd. Maxi's their second best player. He wasn't like a top 2-3 pick. So I think this gives hope to everybody, that I think a little bit, because you can look at it and say they tanked. They did. They totally stripped the whole thing down, and they're like, we'll make trades with anybody. We'll get as many assets as we can, and we just need to find our guys, and you're going to have to give us time to find our guys. The Wizards are going through this right now, where hopefully they're going to find their guys. I don't quite see it yet, although I'm willing to hear out Sarr, actually, at this point, that he is going to be one of these players that's going to be really, really good. I'll hear him out for now. Koulibaly, I'm cooling on the idea that he's going to be great. He might be good. We'll see about everybody else, and then we'll see who they get. But I will say, like, off of this championship, again, Chet Holmgren's a really high pick. The other stars are not, actually. So, let's cool it on, you have to have the number 1 or 2 overall pick to ever actually be good. They've proven otherwise. If you're willing to be, well, I guess some people don't think it's patient. 6 years into a rebuild. I think it is. I think 6 years is actually a long time to ask your fan base to go, we might suck for a long time. You're going to have to deal with that. But they ended up winning it all, and it all paid off. And good for them. I think things like this are actually good for this league. I don't think they're bad. I think some people probably think this is not good. I actually think this is good. I prefer to have a little more parity that's in there. And I do like that this like star ring culture hunting thing kind of got put to bed a little bit this year by what's happened there, Indiana, Denver, a couple other places where you're not seeing people go hunt around to try to find the next team and, become the Woj bombs of the summer. So I actually think this is good. I bet, well, we'll see what the ratings say, but I bet Adam Silver, if he's being honest, likes this too, that he got like a homegrown, built up, made team, small market, wins the whole thing. I bet he likes this.
Well, 2 teams, really. I mean, when you look at it, like this matchup was, 2 teams that no one really expected to be here. I would say this too, just to rewind to the whole like rebuild thing as well. Like they went and acquired Caruso. Like that was the perfect, hey, we're ready to win right now. We need that defensive rotational piece.
Hartenstein too.
Yeah,
I didn't think the Knicks should have lost him. I thought that was a bad person for them to lose. Anyway, go on.
Right, but like that's what, and both of those guys, it's really funny. Like, she was saying, 6 years in the rebuild. I'm like, no, those types of moves are the ones where you go, we have a team and we just need to like round out the edges, essentially. Like I remember when they got Caruso last offseason, it was like, oh, that's a perfect acquiring for them because they needed to be better defensively and needed a little bit more toughness. And that's exactly what he was last night too, by the way. Like he was perfect last night. So yeah, I mean, I look at that option too. And to your point of just how the feel around the NBA is, to me, I think this is two big factors here. And I told you this. I don't think they're gonna First Take ain't talking about this, but I bet you behind closed doors, it's two things. It's okay, it doesn't matter if we're a small market team anymore, right? It doesn't matter. If you have the talent, you get the talent. Maybe it's gonna give you some trouble if you want to retain talent. I'll hear that argument out. Like if SGA wants to go somewhere, maybe, but you don't know. That's up to the player. And the other one that I told you and that we've talked about throughout, the last month or so, essentially over the last two sets of series, has been the effort. I think there's going to be a discussion around, behind closed doors of, get guys in here that want to try, that want to play hard, over the guys that, hey, they look like they're a really good shooter, but they don't put in all this effort. I think there's going to be a discussion behind closed doors of, there's going to be a shift of get guys in here that actually want to go to work. And maybe that's going to be all the difference.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if all the shifts in the salary cap have kind of helped make this happen too.
Maybe.
That all of this, are you willing to pay these premiums to have this team? We're going to put you in this different level. The owners then have to decide whether they're willing to do this. Golden State famously has in recent years. Other teams have not. There was a lot of reporting out of Indiana the past couple of weeks where they've never gone into that luxury tax level, but because of the team that they have, they are now openly willing to do it because they have the type of team they've been. I forgot about this. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They got swept by Boston, but because Boston just ran roughshod over everybody. I don't remember that they had actually gotten that far. So this was 2 years in a row, and good for them for doing it their way too. The Siakam acquisition has turned out to been franchise changing for them. The Halliburton acquisition has been franchise changing for them. I still do believe, and I'm not going to get away from it, that I believe that the NBA still has a star player problem. The star players, forget the ring chasing stuff for a minute. The star players have been at the forefront of load management, not taking their regular seasons seriously enough. I don't know if that's contributed to all the injuries that have occurred, specifically in the playoffs. I don't know. I'd have to ask the sports scientists about that. But there might be a bit of a correlation between the way they're handling the regular season and getting themselves prepared for the long season. I don't know. I'd have to hear that one out. And then, that they're kind of dismissing things that matter for their league, like the All-Star weekend. I don't want to lose sight of all of that stuff, but I do think this is good. It was an opening for teams that don't typically get there. And I'll go back to what Adam Silver said a couple weeks ago, and somebody, brought him on the set and they were like, Oklahoma City, Indiana, boy, you're not getting the Knicks, Celtics, Lakers, whatever. And he's like, if this was the NFL, it's the Packers and the Steelers, you all would be celebrating it. And I don't know that the NBA can get there, but they're closer to it than what they've been in recent years. Oklahoma City's won a championship. Boston won. Boston was a flop this year. Only they can really answer what went wrong. What went wrong with them? They're already talking about shaking things up there. There's trades that look like that are coming to that team, even though I wouldn't change a thing unless there's just something wrong in the locker room. I wouldn't change a thing about them, but there must be something wrong there because they're flipping things around or they're going to make some moves. But here's Indiana that's been in the finals. Boston was in the finals. Denver's won a championship. Dallas was right there. A year later, they're flipping things around. Oklahoma City wins this. They look like they're kind of set to be there for a while, but in recent years, there have been no dynasties. Minnesota always feels like they're on the cusp, especially as Ant gets better and better and better if they get the right people next to him. I think this is good for the league. I actually having some team be uber dominant. It's fine for a period of time. When they join each other to build these super teams, I think it's actually been bad for the league. I think it's been bad for the conversation around the league. And now that we're seeing this, the Inside the NBA guys made fun of the ESPN guys all year long for, you guys are completely ignoring the best teams because you're so caught up in all of the gossip, the storylines, and all the things that happen in the summer and who doesn't like who and who doesn't want to be somewhere and who wants to go somewhere else. You lost the story of the season. You guys paid no attention to the two teams that ended up being there in the end. So maybe there will be a shift in coverage because I think they need it too.
I mean, I think it already started yesterday when Durant got traded. I don't even know how a league, I don't want to talk about that yet, but I don't even know how as a league you let that happen. If I'm Adam Silver, I'm pretty pissed yesterday of like, guys, game 7 of the finals is coming here. Do not let this slip out until tomorrow or Tuesday, even at that. Like, this is where the NFL has it so figured out, by the way, where they are to a T ready to take over the news cycle at every step. They do not let
they put
any
a
of this.
moratorium Super Bowl week. They're like, no news, guys, unless
Right.
it's like, something out of the blue that we can't control. But if you're going to announce some kind of trade or cut or something like that after the Super Bowl, guys, we own this part of this calendar. Why would we mess it up with something else?
Right. Like, I think the last time it was big was when the Redskins got Alex Smith. That was it. And even then,
they
remember,
got pissed at him. They got pissed at him when they announced it. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was never again. This is the Super Bowl. Like, we will keep it to the actual news. Like, the biggest thing this year was Hendrickson asking for a trade. They're not mad about that one. That's just like what the news was. But that's where I'm with in the NBA, where it's like, you could have let this finals chatter happen for a week, then announced it next week, and then all of a sudden everyone's talking about the trade. And instead, you're cannibalizing your own biggest game of the year for that trade. It's really weird how the coverage is for that league.
I'll get into that in a minute, and how it was announced too, which was obviously planned, like so utterly ridiculous what they did. Let me go back to game 7 though for a minute. This sucked that Tyrese Halliburton got injured. It's not a surprise. I think players do need to start paying a little. Listen, I don't blame him. He wants to play in game 7 of the NBA finals. He wanted to play in game 6 too. For all the people that tried to make up some excuse like he didn't hurt himself, which that's the internet culture that I hate, that nothing can be real. Everything's an excuse. Nothing's real. This is now the second time in these playoffs that a superstar, Tatum and now Halliburton, had problems in their calf and all of a sudden blew out their Achilles tendon. I would bet that the doctors know that there is a risk of something like this happening when you start feeling that kind of weakening in your leg. And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here, because to tell him you might blow out your Achilles, don't play game 7 of the NBA finals, I think is probably something that he'd regret the rest of his life. That said, he may never be the same. Like, this injury for basketball players is really bad. And if it is ruptured, which I assume that it is, he's not going to play for a year. Or at bare minimum, sometime next spring is when he may play, probably be out for a year. And a number of the players that have had this have never been the same in this sport, have never been the same. So I hope that that's not the fate for him, because he had just turned the corner into, oh man, this guy is a playoff killer. And it's going to be unfortunate if this derails his career. And then, it so puts a shadow over the whole finals. I mean, because it's going to forever going to be, well, I don't know. If he had played in the second half, I don't know that Indiana wouldn't have won the championship. So that's what stinks about the whole thing.
You have to remember Dame got hurt too. Dame also had the Achilles injury as well, because all of the, the Twitter sleuths, they all wore number 0. So everybody's calling it a 0 curse because they're all wearing the same number and they all hurt their Achilles. So that as well, I'm with you. I don't know if he's going to be the same. And you and I were just talking literally last week of, if Halliburton does this for an entire year, like, where do we start putting him? Top 5 in the league, something like that. Like, wasn't outrageous to say that if he played like an entire year under what he was doing in these playoffs. Now you don't get to see that. You might not see him at all next year, depending on how that recovery goes, because that's the thing. It is a mixed bag on how, this is a recovery for some guys. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. And now you've had 3 major stars have this injury happen. And I don't really know what it is. I don't want to call that like some kind of like pandemic, but it's just weird that you've had 3 pretty big names go down with this.
Yeah. Look, all of this stuff adds up to, and this is what will never change. Their season's too long. Like, it just is. Like, the players are trying to find ways to not get fined or lose their money, but play less games. I understand why. Like, it's a lot. Here they are in the playoffs, blowing out their Achilles tendons. And I mean, I'll hear out, like, as much as I don't like the way that they go about, the handling the schedule. and how I really, really, really don't like the lack of professionalism around the All-Star game and the way that they message this. There's got to be a better way. And I think they do need to sit down and talk, because the messaging of it looks really poor. It's like the league is saying, why don't you just do this? And they're not complying. And then it diminishes the regular season. Then they get around to the playoffs, and then things like this happen. And it all kind of adds up into one big mishmash of what do we do here? So I don't know. We'll have to see. One other thing, especially on the coverage. I mean, Twitter went nuts on ESPN's pregame show yesterday. And I got to say, like, I love Stephen A. I mean, I know he's ubiquitous. So, everywhere he is, he's going to get, there's going to be backlash to him. He's just on too much. So there's going to be backlash to him. I will say, this is not his best role. I really don't think he can be, quote unquote, analyst on his show at 10 a.m. in the morning. But before the game and in the middle of the game and in light of solitaire, I actually think that I would rather have players talking about this and it not get derailed into some kind of, his instinct is to pick a fight and have a semantic argument with somebody. And I just don't like the way you communicate changes by the forum that you're in. And it's really, I mean, he's their biggest star, him and McAfee. I get it. You're going to put him on these things. But I really do believe that people who tune in to watch the live sports actually still want the live sports coverage. And there's a time and a place for everything that he does. And he's amazing at it. And it's not really a criticism of him. It's a criticism of ESPN putting someone in a space that leads to this level of criticism of the product that you're putting out there. So it's on the producers for allowing this to happen. They should have the basketball people doing the basketball show in and around Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and it's not time to have hot takes and debates. It really is not. And so I agreed with all the criticism, and now that Inside the NBA is showing up, they won't have this problem, moving forward. But it was not pretty. It was unsightly. And the arguments they were having leading into Game 7 felt contrived and out of place, honestly, for as big of a deal as this game was. I think sometimes, and he is bigger than most sports now, I think he forgets that. And in this case, Game 7 of the NBA Finals, even if he thinks he's bigger than it, he really shouldn't. And he should let the sport take center stage. That would just be my only advice to the ESPN producers. Help him help himself. He can't help himself. He's going to make himself the centerpiece of something. It should not be. Not a Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Game 7 of the NBA Finals stands on its own. And I wish ESPN would have learned that lesson, but they didn't. And they put him in a situation. It's one thing when McAfee is doing College Game Day. College Game Day is kind of that way. Rah, rah, hoorah. Right. But if they put him in the middle of, they do in the playoffs, but they have him on the sideline on an alternate cast, not on the big one, right? So I think the same thing needs to apply with Stephen A. And it'll be very interesting to see what they do. Now that Inside the NBA is coming in, I'm sure he's going to wedge his way into it somehow, but I wouldn't mess with that if I were them. I'd let those guys do their job because they're very, very, very good at doing their job.
As I said, too, it is about how this league is covered compared to others. And I think what happened is ESPN and ABC have gotten the coverage that they just kind of blur the line of what their normal programming is in a pregame for any of the finals games, let alone a Game 7 final. You know what I love? I always love with the NFL. Like, let's take, for example, what is like one of the best productions in the NFL? It's Sunday Night Football, but then there's Football Night in America right before it, right? And they do highlights and talk about some of the stuff, but the second it goes to 8 o'clock, basically, or, 8:10, whatever that exact, number is, they go into pregame of that game. They stop talking about everything else and stop, kind of more of the opinion stuff and jump into what they are about to, undertake in calling that game. And I think the NBA needs a little bit more of that. Like, I'm okay with talking about other things and getting into some debates, but there needs to be a line. Like, there needs to be a stopping point of, all right, let's start actually talking about the game. How will, Indiana defend SGA? What will OKC do if Halliburton can't go? they need to start getting into a little bit of that where there's a line. I'm okay with some of the opinion stuff. Don't get me wrong. And especially in that league, I think you need it. But like, that's where I think the NFL gets it right so much. There's a stopping line where all of a sudden it's all right. Let's start talking about the games.
Talk about the games,
and that's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so good.
Monday through Friday, I go on this show and I will give you my opinions. The second I get to game day and I'm doing the game, we're doing the game.
Yeah.
And if I get asked my opinion about one specific topic, I will give it. But I always turn it back into here's what we expect for the game. And I try to lead it that way. And I'm not trying to say I do this better than anybody else, but that's my mindset about it. Once we get to the game, it's about the game.
Yeah.
And I hope that like ESPN, I hope Adam Silver makes them change all this, because inside the NBA, they're incredible with all their chemistry, but they do make it about the games. They almost always do. And then they get derailed in their own personal stuff and they have fun, but it is about the games. And it's not these concocted arguments. And as they pointed out all year, they will pay attention to the teams that do matter and not spend the inordinate amount of time with the teams that don't, because the games still matter. If all you're doing is talking about the Lakers constantly, but they're not a real threat for the championship this year, then you've lost sight of who is up for the championship this year, and you're not paying attention to the sport. So we'll see. All right. Well, the thing that was already mentioned here, the KD trade was announced on the day of Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which is, I agree with you, that should never, ever, ever have happened. Like they should have held that back for a day. But he's at Fanatics Fest, which I'm going to ask you about in a minute, and he is sitting on stage when it's announced. Like, gee, I wonder if there's a coincidence that he's sitting up there and can address this. Like he doesn't know this is. It's some surprise to him that this is happening when there are other teams that, at least have been reported that made offers. I wouldn't be surprised. And that many of them were turned down. Like, what? He doesn't know. So everything's wrestling now. He's sitting up on stage. They announce it as he's sitting up on stage. What a coincidence that this happened. And he's off to Houston. So number one, presentation-wise, it did avoid him having to do some big press conference about it. I'll give him that. It did avoid that. And as far as the trade goes, I'm not sure I like it for either one of these teams, but whatever, I guess he had to go somewhere. And it does sound like a bunch of other teams, because of his age, I think more than anything, they're looking at this going, why would we give up this crazy haul to get him? How long is he going to be here? And what's he going to be able to do on a night-to-night basis anymore?
I actually like this trade for both teams. Phoenix unloads, gets to reload some of those second-round picks that they gave up, especially in that Wizards trade. Houston hits the reset button with a player that didn't work out for them. They give up pick 10, which is a big deal. Yeah. But at the same time, look at what the West was this year, right? Like, you got to get past OKC, but other than OKC, like, everything's open behind them. I like this for both teams, if I'm being quite honest. What are you getting at a KD, though, is the biggest question. Because he hasn't been healthy in like 3 or 4 years, Like, I don't know what the expectation is. Hopefully you get to the playoff. Hopefully you get to the playoffs and he's going to be, playoff KD, Slim Reaper KD. But that's not a guarantee right now. There's risk on both sides, but I do like the trade for both teams.
So, Phoenix just has to break this thing up. It did not work. They tried to trade him at the deadline. This was dead man walking for months because, these players get real wonky about that. Like, he was like, oh, you tried to trade me to Golden State. Well, I didn't want to do that. So now they make this move. I don't love Houston trading young for old. I like that. That's a no most of the time to do that. And they did. Jalen Green's good. So I don't quite get why they wanted to give. There must be something going on there, because I don't know why they wanted to give up on him for this. And for Phoenix, I guess they just had to get out of jail. They have too many guys making too much money that's going literally nowhere. That team didn't even make the playoffs. That's absurd that they didn't make the playoffs. So they had to move on from him. There is a bunch of reporting already out of Phoenix. This is not a surprise. The second KD was traded, I went, Brad's next. Like, there's no chance that he's not. He does have, I saw the contract, 2 years left, still has the no trade clause that transferred with him over to Phoenix. But the reporting now is they're either going to trade him or buy him out. And I'm sure he doesn't want to be there anymore, so I'm sure he'll work something out with, well, I don't know. I mean, he was tough on the Wizards, so I don't know what he's going to do. I think the buyout is probably coming for him. It'll give him his freedom, and then it'll offset the contract.
I think actually, if you were to ask him, he doesn't care, and it's tax-free out there. I think he'd be fine with just playing there.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah, because I just think that's Brad. I think Brad, for all intents and purposes, Brad cares about getting paid, and I don't think he really cares one way or the other. I'm guessing buyout because he's going to go, no, I don't want to be moved anywhere. That's going to be my guess.
It was funny. I saw somebody put up some graphic of like the Phoenix roster, and it's like 8 shooting guards and like nothing else. It's the worst constructed roster you've ever seen with money that's allocated all over the place. I assume they'll figure out Green and Booker in some way, and then they'll have to just fill in the holes around it now. Let's see what they get for Brad if Brad agrees to be traded. But if he agrees to be traded, it will be to specific places.
That's right.
So buyout is probably happening. That's probably what is coming down the road here, because they are at this point in that contract where you could do that. And obviously he'll continue playing somewhere. I bet for the Clippers or Lakers, he probably wants to go to LA. So he probably will end up signing with one of those two. That's my guess with him, because he's been matriculating his way out to the West Coast really for a while now.
You don't think he's going to re-sign with the Wizards to get the all-time scoring, record with them? Remember, that was your thing? You want him to re-sign so he becomes the franchise's all-time leading scorer?
Now I don't want him to. I don't want him to anymore.
See? Told you.
I tried. Brad, I was on your side for so long. As long as we could all just acknowledge the truth of the whole thing, which is you're a good player, but we're never a great player. You were never elevating all the people around you. You're not a franchise cornerstone player. But if we could just agree to, but we do think you're really, really good, and everybody likes Brad. Like if we could just come to an agreement on that, I will back you here. But he decided that was not the way. He had to be King Brad, Lord of the Washington fiefdom.
That's right.
And Ted, for some bizarre reason, believed that for a very, very, very long time. So much so, he was in press releases about other moves the franchise made.
It was not a fun time. I did not like the Brad era. I didn't like it for a while. And
no.
You know my feelings on it. Color me shocked that it's only been 2 years in Phoenix, and oh my God, it's already not working out.
Yes.
Shocker over here that it's not working out.
I got him going either Lakers or Clippers. I think he ends up in LA. Whichever one of them wants him more. That's what I think will happen. All right, take a quick break. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Let me do a little bit of football here. And one is this. Over the weekend, the former minority owner of the Commanders, Fred Smith, of course, this was of the Redskins, really, before actually he was no longer the minority owner when they got to be Washington football team and eventually Commanders. So former minority owner of the Redskins, to be honest, Fred Smith, who is founder of FedEx. His son is Arthur Smith, who is former head coach of the Falcons, now with Pittsburgh, offensive coordinator, passed away over the weekend. Around here, considering he built FedEx, it's odd, but around here, he is really going to be remembered for being at the forefront of forcing this team to change its name, I think, as part of a palace coup to try to get Dan Snyder out. Whether he really wanted the team to change their name or not is really up for debate. And now that he's no longer with us, could never actually formally settle that for us. I don't believe that he was, I just in my heart don't believe that that's what he actually wanted them to do. I think he and the other minority owners were trying to find a pressure point to get Dan Snyder to sell to them and leave or get kicked out. And the NFL ultimately did not side with the minority owners and bought them out, which was a mistake at a rate that was far lower than what the team was eventually sold for to the Josh Harris group. All's well that ends well here. But it is, when I saw this over the weekend, I'm like, that's a complicated story to tell about what his legacy is with the ownership of this team, because the truth is somewhere in the middle. Did FedEx as a company, as some other companies, really want to take a stand over the name, or did Fred Smith at the direction of its owner and founder, along with other minority owners, simply just want this majority owner out and take over the team, whether they wanted to change the name or not?
Yeah, it's a complicated one to say the least. I will always just point it to it was our first sign of they were trying to get Dan out. It was the very first like wave of how do we get this guy out of, being
Yes.
the boss of this franchise. And to me, that's what I'll remember him for. And did it come at the expense of the old name? Yes. You and I have talked about it at length. I think the name was always going to change eventually one day, anyways. And
So
it
do
just
I.
happened to, really ramp up in that summer of 2020 where things were very, testy and high with a lot of things happening in this country. And they were, moved along, essentially, that old name. I will always remember him as just someone that kind of started to get the ball rolling with Dan selling the team. Look, that also came at the expense of his literal own stake in the franchise. He was
That's right.
bought out for the price that he paid, not for the price that the franchise was worth,
That's right.
which at the end of the day was literally billions of dollars. So, I will remember it for that it was a very kind of complicated out for him for this franchise too.
I remember at the time going, there's no chance that the NFL is going to side with minority owners, because if they do, even if you think they're right, and even if you do want to change, if you do this, it emboldens other minority ownership groups to try this with other franchises. And they needed to take a stand that we stand with our ownership group, whether you like them or not, good times or bad times. We're not going to do this. And so they took a gambit. It didn't really work out. It did alter the franchise's history. And some years later, the Josh Harris group comes along and buys it for what it's worth. And then that's looking like a ridiculous investment. Can a lot change in less than 2 years. They bought it for $6 billion, and people were like, oh my God, that's a crazy price, especially for a franchise that needs a new stadium, needs all this stuff to be put. It's not even like a turnkey operation. You're going to have to put millions and millions and millions. And in the case, billions of dollars into a new stadium to get this kind of back to modern times and up to speed. And then boom, the Lakers sell for $10 billion. So out of the blue, it's looking like a good investment. Not that it feels like it's going anywhere. I did see this over the week. I don't know if you saw this. The Eagles are now, the link is semi-old now, 25 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. The governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, was at a NASCAR event and was asked about the Pocono Raceway, because I guess that's old. NASCAR wants to talk to them about refurbishing it. NASCAR's been going to a lot of different locales, trying to do different races, trying to up the engagement of their sport. Like they're doing one-offs in football stadiums, or they're doing all sorts of unique things. They're going to Mexico City. They're getting away from their tour, which I think is somewhat of a threat to, standard bears like the Poconos. And so they're basically talking about, we need a new place. At the same time, the Steelers and Eagles have stadiums that are actually aging now. But I did see this, and I thought this was an interesting point. Jeffrey Lurie has, talked openly. They're in no rush. I think their lease is up in like 6 or 7 years. And unlike Washington, they don't own the link. The Philadelphia owns the link. So they got to make a choice about this, re-up a lease, refurbish it, modernize it, whatever, or build a new stadium. Jeffrey Lurie was asked about it. And it was this is an interesting one, because I haven't heard an owner say this yet. They've won 2 Super Bowls there. And he openly said, I'm struggling with the idea of leaving a building where we've won. Like we'd never won before, and we've won there. And this is a home of champions now. It's not the Vet. It's a home of champions now. So it did sound like he seriously was like, I don't know if I necessarily want to build a new stadium. This is our home, and this is where we've won championships. I was like, okay, not that they're not going to pour millions of dollars into modernizing it no matter what. And I will say this too, they have a great stadium. Like it doesn't feel like it's old at all. It doesn't feel aged. It's in a perfect spot. It feels modern in there. So I don't think there's any rush, honestly. And I like that we finally had an owner say, why would I leave a place where we won? Like everybody likes coming here. Why not? We're champions here.
Not only that, like take away the Super Bowls. Like I know that's a big statement by me, but like they've been successful in the regular season now for 25 years in that place.
Yes.
Like when haven't they been good in the regular season?
They
there,
probably have one of the best home records over the stretch of time in that stadium of anybody in the NFL.
Right, and I'm with you. Like those are those are the stadiums where you go in, it feels modern, it feels good, and you go look at a stadium like MetLife, and you're like, you just built this one. How come it's not as good as that one over there? Like that's how good the link is compared to MetLife. So I'm not surprised he kind of said something like this. What I will say though is, look, you have, funny enough, Josh Harris looking into moving the Sixers downtown, right? That puts that
Not
building.
happening now, by the way. That's not happening now.
That's dead. I didn't know that was
They're
dead.
they're
Okay.
they're staying over in South Philly in the same spot. They're going to build a new stadium where the Sixers and Flyers are.
Okay. So it's going to be in that same
They're not leaving
development
that area. That's where that ended up. The city center thing ended up not happening.
Okay, got it. Okay. So no, but that's what I was gonna say. So here's what I was gonna say was I would say don't leave, or you pour in all of the money into that stadium, or build another stadium in that same complex. And if you're telling me that they're just gonna build another arena, well, you can just kind of shift the arenas around and build a new football stadium on one of those sites.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would do. I've said this before too. I love the Philly sports ecosystem that all the teams play out there. You can tailgate for every single one. Sometimes there's events happening at both, two of the stadiums at the same time. I don't think you mess with that. Like, I'm sorry, but like that setup is so nice. It's right there by the highway. Like, I don't mess with that. And if Lori's even kind of contemplating that, I hope it's in the same area, that it's not being moved somewhere else.
I agree. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. I did mention Fanatics Fest, which occurred over the weekend. They had WWE style presentations with Tom Brady ripping up jerseys and Eli Manning jumping on him. It was really corny. They had a lot of star power show up there, get on stage, do talks, sign autographs. Listen, I used to be, still am to a degree, not as much as you. I think you collect like jerseys and hats and things like that. I used to collect cards and collectibles. I still have a lot of it. I don't do a ton of it now. I'm very picky about the things that I will like bring in and collect, but I still am, as any major sports fan is. This was high time that we had something like this, by the way. And it feels like I've been waiting for this to happen. Like forever in my youth, when I went to collectible shows, they were always in some auditorium somewhere. It was just a bunch of tables, and maybe there's a couple stars there. They're signing things. There's a line out the door, but it didn't feel as coordinated or as big as this. So I will say that as corny as some of this was, it was huge. They had real prominent of their day stars show up and be part of it. And it was the first time I've seen a collectible show in a while that I'm like, ooh, I would have gone to that. Like, that's actually really cool. So I give Michael Rubin credit for pulling off another big thing in a space that frankly was like nerddom forever and had some cachet to it. It was actually very cool looking.
So this is, I think, the second year they've done this. I think they did this last year for the first time. Look, it depends what your bread and butter is when it comes to collectibles. There were some of those tables and stuff. There was some clips where like Livy Dunn was looking for a Paul Skeens rare card.
Yeah. And Josh Harris bought a Jaden Daniels card for like $500,000, something like that. Yeah.
This is where, this is being a part of the Michael Rubin cog in the machine that I just can't stand. It's very forced. It's very, we're going to make this moment go viral without having it happen organically. It's a lot of bits.
The KD thing was planned. Like, there's no chance it wasn't. He was sitting on stage when that trade was announced. Like, come on.
My thing isn't even the KD thing. It was, how many bits do I need to see Tom Brady get mad about being handed an Eli Manning jersey? By Saturday, I'd seen 4 different versions of it. I was just like, who the hell cares? So, like the guy's the greatest quarterback of all time, and you keep bringing up those 2 Super Bowls, fine. But it was really like, here's the thing. On its surface, sports has been overdue for its Comic-Con. Like, it's major. Here's the big one. And this is what they're becoming. And this is Fanatics Fest. And I'm okay with that. But with the Fanatics machine that Rubin has created, it just comes along with a lot of BS that I'm not a big fan of. Like, I even look at, they launched those NFL soccer jerseys. I don't know if you saw that. But, like, they basically did Fanatics versions of NFL soccer jerseys. That was a big hyping up thing. And I'm going, I don't know, do NFL fans want to buy a soccer jersey of their team for the same price that I could just go buy a Jaden Daniels jersey? Like, it's a lot of hype. It's a lot of shiny. It's a lot of newness that I don't know everyone really wants. I will say this, though. Like, Darren Ravel, for example, was going around and looking at really rare cards and really rare autographs. I'm into that side of things. But there's just a lot of extra fluff that I'm good for and I don't need to see. And you go look at some of those prices for the autographs and stuff. it's not for the normal human being. Like,
Yeah,
they're
it's
really
not.
expensive. You have to go up to New York. Not that that's crazy, but it's a mixed bag. I'm with you. Like, sports needs is Comic-Con. This is probably going to become it, but it just comes with a lot of extra things that I'm very weary on.
It felt overdue that we had an event that felt big like this around it, and not like stuck in that land of you're haggling with some guy from Missouri who's trying to sell you this card, because that's all what it used to be.
Sure.
So I appreciate that this happened, and they are good at producing content, and they got news for themselves in a bunch of different viral moments. Some of them were really corny because like humor and acting really doesn't go hand in hand with sports. There's very few people that pull it off, and every time they try it, and I was part of it too, doing Sports Center commercials for years. Like, it's hard to pull that stuff off. All right, last thing real quick. The Nats are now 2-13 in their last 15. Yesterday, I just happened to be out and caught the end of their game where they went from up 3-0 to down 13-3 in like 2.5 late innings. And then the Dodgers, that's embarrassing when you put a position player out there to pitch, and just gave up a few runs in the ninth inning because you don't care. So they got punked a little bit, yesterday. That was pretty hard to watch. I still think I'm on watch here of let's just see, because this is beyond bumpy now. It's like, okay, so the losing streak is over, but not by much. And yesterday was really ugly again. So I'm on red alert watch. Will the learners do something? I don't know.
I will say this too. It is the Dodgers. Like, it's hard for me to get really mad when that lineup just all of a sudden kills you. Essentially.
Sure. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, who they play? I mean, the losses to the Rockies and the Marlins was ridiculous. Like, losing to the Dodgers on the road. Okay, they're the best team. Like, I get that, but if you're going to get fully embarrassed like they were yesterday, I still think it falls into the category of, all right, let's just keep an eye on things right now.
There was one final takedown piece late last week that I did love. Britt Giroli, who of course used to cover the Orioles and the Nationals, now does more of like national stories with The Athletic. She brought up just a great point that was very simple, but I think we kind of got lost in the shuffle. And it was how Davey Martinez said, oh, well, it's not on the coaches. And then he had a quote, I guess the next day or later on last week, where he said, we got to start doing the little things so we can start winning again. And Britt brought up an amazing point that, like, I wish we would have brought up. And it was, I don't know, Davey, like the last 5-6 years, you guys don't do the little things. You constantly have bad base running. You constantly have bad defense that lose games. And if that's not the coaches and that's not the players, what are you guys good for, essentially? And I thought that was just to give Britt credit there. She's right. This team hasn't done the little things that often, that great. And it was just a nice little point of, you say it's not on you guys, but here's this thing that has been, kind of the thorn in your side for a couple of years. Yeah. You haven't improved on it. So
yeah, it's not good.
Right.
It's really not all around. Anyone complaining about any other part of the organization, none of it is like doing their job the way that it should. And that's the so don't throw the rings at me or the ring. Don't do it. Okay. Not right now. I will never, ever, ever diminish what you accomplished with that team. However, 6-7 years later, don't throw that ring at me when things look as a mess as it does across the board. All right. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.